All right. All right. Well, good morning. Good to see you all this morning. We are in 2 Kings 17 today. 2 Kings verse 17, or chapter 17, about verse 13, I think we covered. And so we're going to continue on today. Again, if you want one of these books and you didn't get one, or you want one to give to somebody else, these are real quick. 30, depending on how fast you read, 30 minute to an hour and a half, we'll say, somewhere in there. I read fast and to read slow. This is a good book about why this matters, why we're taking this view. Because you will remember, some of y'all have been here since the beginning, because I cheated a little and started in Exodus instead of Genesis, because we have some non-recovering Genesis junkies in the room. Genesis 50 times. I'm looking at you, Mrs. Holmes, and others. Y'all been through Genesis 1 to 11 about 1,000 times, and nobody ever went through Numbers or Leviticus. So we started in Exodus, but we did connect it right to the seed theology, right? Going back to the proto-euangelion, Genesis 3, the seed of the woman shall crush the head of the seed of the serpent. And we can talk about that, but we traced it, right? Several times I've shown you a slideshow, PowerPoint presentation about the important passages. All of the ones that state or restate the Abrahamic covenant, all the way through even Balaam's prophecy, and then the Davidic covenant in is it First King, Second Samuel? Sorry, we're in 2 Kings. 2 Samuel 7, all the way through, right? Davidic covenant, place of the seed, the relative nature of the seed, and the importance to each of the covenants, right? And we said that this is a prophetic message. So what we're doing, minus the Genesis dopamine hit, right, is the prophetic books of the Bible. The Torah is considered prophetic in the Bible. Moses authored it, one of the greatest prophet, according to Jewish understanding, I think, in the Old Testament. So it's significant when he says something like, there will be a prophet like me, but greater than me, who is to come, and you shall heed him. That matters, right? And so 2 Kings is the final technical prophetic book in the former prophets, right? They're the major prophets and the minor prophets. Basically, and I know some of you are studying the major prophets and the minor prophets now, ladies. Basically, those are all saying, see, we told you so. There's almost nothing. There's new messianic information. There's some new information. But almost all of the major and minor prophets could be consolidated actually into 2 Kings 17. Almost everything there, as far as this is the crap that you brought on yourselves and this is the only resolution. It doesn't change anything in the big picture. The kingdom is the covenant, right? The kingdom is the promise, and the king is necessary for that. And y'all have done a really bad job in his absence. And there's only one hope and one resolution. So Danny here went out and found a Jewish commentary on Isaiah 53 and found out that Pastor Josh wasn't lying about Jewish interpretations of Isaiah 53, which is, it's either ignorance, like they don't touch it, they don't read it, they don't comment on it, or they approach it very liberally, and I don't use that term complimentarily, right? It's a liberal view where they're taking individual references to a one righteous man, the one suffering servant, and who takes a substitutionary role, who bears our sins himself, and say that that is about the nation of Israel. That Israel is bearing the sins of the world, that Israel is the servant that is suffering for Yahweh, that Israel, now get that, you have in the same Jewish scripture, the same Hebrew Bible, what we would call sometimes the Old Testament, though my professors are finding that, well, they're falling out of favor to call it old. I dig old stuff, so calling something old doesn't mean that it's bad to me. Got more old stuff around than I know what to do with. But anyway, they think, regardless, this is an explanation of exactly why that can't be. You have 2 Kings 17 and you have Isaiah 53 in the same Hebrew Bible. And they're saying that Israel is the righteous suffering servant of Yahweh, suffering for the sins of the world, bearing all by Israel's stripes, the world is healed, etc., etc., etc. When the same Bible that they have, it's not in, you don't have to go to Hebrews or Romans or the general epistles or Revelation to get this. 2 Kings 17, written during the Babylonian captivity, right? Syria first and Babylon, right? Written during that captivity, saying, to this day, this is why you guys are suffering. This is why you're in exile. This is why it happened. So we're going to read that. Okay, again, I think we read some of these verses before, but it's the former prophets, right? You need to know what the authoritative message is, right? Why Israel failed. It actually starts in verse 7, right? So now this came about because, a very simple language, right? Causative, not correlative, not analogously, not allegorically, causative, right? This came about because the sons of Israel had sinned against Yahweh their God, who had brought them up from the land of Egypt, from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and they had feared other gods and walked in the customs of the nations whom Yahweh had driven out before the sons of Israel, and in the customs of the kings of Israel which they had introduced. Sons of Israel did things secretly, which were not right against Yahweh their God. Moreover, they built for themselves high places in all their towns, from watchtower to fortified city. They set for themselves sacred pillars and asherim on every high hill and under every green tree, and there they burned incense on all the high places, as the nations did, which Yahweh had carried away to exile before them. And they did evil things, provoking Yahweh. They served idols, concerning which Yahweh had said to them, you shall not do this thing. The one thing, right? You shall not do it. They did it. Yet Yahweh warned Israel and Judah through all his prophets and every seer, saying, turn from your evil ways and keep my commandments, my statutes, according to all the laws which I commanded your fathers and which I sent to you through my servants the prophets. However, they did not listen, but stiffened their neck like their fathers, who did not believe in Yahweh their God. I think that's probably a reference to the Exodus generation. They rejected his statutes and his covenant, which he made with their fathers, and his warnings with which he warned them. And they followed vanity and became vain, and went after the nations which surrounded them, concerning which Yahweh had commanded them not to do like them. They forsook all the commandments of Yahweh their God, and made for themselves molten images, even 2 calves, and made an Asherah, and worshipped all the host of heaven, and served Baal. Then they made their sons and daughters pass through the fire, and practiced divination and enchantments, and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of Yahweh, provoking him. So Yahweh was very angry with Israel, and removed them from his sight. None was left except the tribe of Judah. Also, Judah did not keep the commandments of Yahweh their God, but walked in the customs which Israel had introduced. Yahweh rejected all the descendants of Israel, and afflicted them, and gave them into the hand of plunderers, until he had cast them out of his sight. When he had torn Israel from the house of David, they made Jeroboam, right, the son of Nebat, the bad guy, right, and the former prophets, 1st and 2nd Kings certainly. It says, then Jeroboam drove Israel away from following Yahweh and made them commit a great sin. The sons of Israel walked in all the sins of Jeroboam, which he did. They did not depart from them until the Lord, or Yahweh, removed Israel from his sight. As he spoke through all his servants, the prophets, so Israel was carried away into exile from their own land to Assyria until this day. So this is going on. This is contemporary events, right? Writers of scripture, from the writer's perspective, right? Watching, he's probably hearing people moan and groan, right? Sort of like Tevye, right? Fiddler on the Roof. We know you're your chosen people, but once in a while, couldn't you choose someone else? Right? Why are we like this? If we're God's chosen covenant people, why are we suffering like we do? There's always the same explanation, that you did not believe in Yahweh's promises, and you did not obey Yahweh, and you did not heed what he said to you. And so that's always the answer. So Israel was carried away into exile from their own land until Assyria to this day. So what happens? By the way, Randy Price talks about this. Did they take all of them? No. No, they didn't take all of them. They took a lot of them.
Yeah.
Took a lot of them. But they did do what nations did then, right? They were now a vassal state, and they moved their own people into the land, which was, let's just say that no culture or civilization suffers that for very long. Let him who has an ear hear, right? No culture survives intentional contamination. No culture survives that. They don't, which is why I talk about Islam a lot. Why are there, anyway, no culture, that's just at a pragmatic level, right? It's not of the same significance as what is happening in Israel in 2 Kings 17, right? That is a significant issue because of the particular unconditional covenant that Israel has, as well as the conditional covenant, the Mosaic covenant that they possessed and did not heed, which told them explicitly that this was going to happen, right? So you have one, anybody who has kids plural, has one that wants to test everything you say more than the other. Yes? Right? You told them exactly who they are and what they need to do. You told them, you warned them about the consequences of not doing so, and they don't take you seriously enough. I mean, that's basically Israel. They never figured this out. But the question is, don't look at Gabriel like that. I wasn't looking at Gabriel. Look at both of them. Well, Isaac, I have to say, see, some of y'all only have one kid that tests you every time. I got 5 out of 6 that test me every time. Yeah, they get that from their mother. Not really. They do not. They get it from their father, and I probably deserve every bit of it. But they're not going to survive this, right? And in their land, they told them that was going to happen. The key to this is the king, right? So the northern kingdom shoots itself in the foot from the beginning. They get Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. God promises Jeroboam, if you rule righteously, you have a conditional covenant, and your dynasty will continue for a long time. And he decides, nah, I'm good. And puts up 2 calves at either end of the country. From the very beginning, they know they're going to get dragged out of the land if they read the Bible. If they read the passages in Deuteronomy that I tell you need to remember, right? The key passages, Deuteronomy 18, but also 28 to 32, particularly through 34. Moses says, y'all are going to, this is what God requires. This is how you're not going to meet it. These will be the consequences, but always look with hope to the future because you possess a covenant that places no demands on you. Places no demands on you. Now, the question comes up when you're talking about the kingdom in today's world. Why does it matter so much? And this is going to sound mean to you. There are a lot of people that believe that they can logically teach something called eternal security and still be supersessionists. They can be Christian anti-Semites and not believe that the kingdom is promised to Israel and still teach eternal security for you. Now, I don't know about now. I'm going to try to get it down to this level. All right, eternal security means that what God has promised, He will do without condition, without requirement. The nature of the Abrahamic covenant, right, is unconditional. It is unconditional. The brass tacks meaning of unconditional covenant is that you can do nothing to violate it. You can do nothing to violate it. You can do nothing to not receive its blessings or its promises. Sometimes there's an unconditional covenant that isn't blessings. But we're talking about the Abrahamic covenant, which is a conditional covenant of blessing that will come upon you. There's nothing you can do to violate it. And that is eternal security of that covenant, is it not? Right? And if you teach that God did not do that once, that God made an unconditional covenant and said, nope, sorry, pull the rug out from under you, then what is to stop him from doing that ever again? So if you don't hold the Abrahamic covenant as being unconditional, that is unable to be violated because it places no conditions on the beneficiaries, right? Unless you understand that, you don't really have a basis for eternal security for the believer in Jesus Christ, who's indwelt by the Holy Spirit. I mean, David had eternal security. Like, eternal security is a very important doctrine, because a lot of people say, well, they weren't indwelt by the Holy Spirit. And I asked him, well, that's fine. David prayed that the Lord would not take the Spirit away from him. Do you think that he became unsaved? And some theological traditions say that he did. It was a revolving door, and if he had lost the Spirit, that he would have been unsaved and need to get resaved. Some traditions, I don't take them very seriously. To be honest, I don't take that seriously. But I do take eternal security very seriously. It is a direct analog, the Abrahamic covenant. You understand that God made the Abrahamic covenant not only, it was because he honored Abraham. Abraham, who believed God, and it's credited to him as righteousness. That was how he was justified. But the Abrahamic covenant came upon the nation of Israel because also of his obedience. It was to honor him. And it placed no requirements ever on the beneficiaries. Not one. Not even on Abraham. Abraham could have fallen off the wagon the second after God cut off that covenant. But God only bound himself to the covenant. Only. And there's nothing there. It matters perhaps more than anything else, the way that you view that initial unconditional covenant made with Israel, particularly to your own day. What are they in violation of? What does 2 Kings 17 say that they're in violation? The Mosaic covenant. Yeah, they were naughty. They were bad. I mean, naughty sounds like I'm being flippant about the nature of their sin. They were bad. Anybody else bad? Raise your hand. You're bad. You are bad. You have had the imputed righteousness of Christ, but you are awaiting the imparted. See, well, I was asking for people to admit that they were a sinner. Bill was committing a sin right then. He didn't want to raise his hand because he was bad. Now you have. That's okay. Lying is a sin too, guys. That's all right. That's okay. What are we talking about? I actually had to correct a friend of mine. He was writing an article for a publication, and he said that justification is the doctrine of imparted righteousness. No, it's not. It's imputed righteousness. It's righteousness that you do not possess. You are declared to have. It is credited to your account. Roman Catholicism teaches some kind of imparted righteousness. You know how you get it? You eat the cracker. You impart the righteousness of Christ. You must divorce your understanding of what happens when you get saved from any kind of expectation of the impartation of Christ's righteousness, because you are awaiting the impartation of Christ's righteousness. You possess the imputation of Christ's righteousness. That is permanent. That's why the covenant can be unconditional, because it has jack diddly to do with anything you ever do in your life. You cannot lose it. You cannot have it taken. It cannot be robbed. It cannot be substituted. Just like with Israel, right? There are temporal consequences. We're going to talk about those out of Matthew 18 in the service. Is God patient with his children? Yes. Is he enduring? Is he persevering? Yes. But it's not like my own mother, right? Who eventually had enough of my crap in her mind and said, you're no longer in relationship to me, disown me, right? God is more patient than my mother. I'm thankful for that. Now, granted, I actually didn't sin against her. I didn't. Just so you're wondering, you guys thinking I was awful to my mother. My mother was awful to me. I did not sin against her. Regardless, though, God doesn't run out of patience, and he holds his unconditional covenants perfectly. He does not need substitutions. He does not need corrections, least of all by some idiot with a PhD that can't read Isaiah 53. Know what I mean? He doesn't need that. Yeah, Bill?
And in spite of all this, they were still his children.
They were, and he refers to them that way, right? He's saying, but understand, this is the present condition. The man is watching it with his eyeballs. He's not prophesying it. Whoever wrote this is watching this with his eyeballs, and this is the lesson, right? And I told you that once the seed doctrine is declared and taught and revealed, it doesn't change. But the Old Testament is essentially Israel trying anything but hope in God, hope in God's promise, the coming of the Messiah, the one righteous ruler. They substitute all their kings, they substitute their religions, they substitute assimilation, they try pluralism with dramatic effect here that we'll read about. Any comments or questions about this, right? Yeah.
The only thing I was going to say
Yeah.
is, it's so easy just to read, so Assyria came in.
They're horrible people.
Extremely cruel.
Mm-hmm.
It was huge. It wasn't like, they marched them off to another land quietly.
Oh, no. Yeah. Exile wasn't a pleasant thing with the Assyrians. They were terribly violent. Chaz, you had a comment.
Yeah, I just wanted, I think sometimes with the eternal security, and I agree completely with Israel
Sure.
and everything, sometimes people go to the other extreme and say, well, everybody in Israel was saved.
No.
And I think that needs to be pointed out. I mean, the remnant was saved, obviously.
Yes.
But, some of these people sacrificing their daughters and stuff, I don't think they were saved.
Sure.
So, he had the covenant with the people of Israel, but individually, not everybody. And sometimes,
correct.
you see people say every Jew
Right.
was saved. I think that's
The issue being, is the nature of the covenant. And you're correct about that, right? So we're talking about temporal consequences, right? And we made the point that when Assyria came in and exiled the people, the believers and the unbelievers suffered because it was a covenant with the nation. So I'm not saying that the Abrahamic covenant offered eternal security of justification to every person of Israel, but the nature of the covenant is unconditional, like the one that grants us eternal security of eternal life. Does that make sense? That God doesn't change his promise, right? So it's a national covenant is different than an unconditional covenant made to redeem an individual. And I think that's what you're getting at, right, Chaz?
Right.
Yeah, right. So the temporal consequences are terrible for everybody. That's Elijah and the 7,000 prophets were suffering in the northern kingdom because they had an unrighteous king, because that's the nature of the thing. And the nation violates the covenant, the nation feels consequences, and the nation is made up of believers and unbelievers. Yeah. What are you going to say, Bill? Did you raise your hand?
I was going to say, if the Abrahamic covenant is not unconditional, then we're all on our own.
Yep. Right. And that's where it puts you, right? And that's, again, this is kind of a rabbit trail. Romans 9-11 is so important. The way you interpret that, what it means, the grafting language and the regrafting language, and what the purpose is, what that means. Certainly, God has a future plan for Israel, but is presently working through the church, right, in this age, in this dispensation. So we can keep that distinct, right? So anyway, the kingdom, it matters a lot. It matters a lot to make sense of the world as it is today. But most importantly, it runs in it. Now, what you'll find is people have stopped using, by the way, if you say replacement theology to a replacement theologian, they get angry. They get upset. If you call them supersessionists, they get a little less upset if they can spell supersessionist. Some of them don't know that they're supersessionists. What the category that they usually use, and what's becoming more common, and this I think is more common among the rise of new post-millennial theology. You don't know what post-millennialism is? Has nothing to do with breakfast cereal. Post-millennial, that's the old pastor joke, right? Old pastor. It was old when I was not old. Yeah. But post-millennialism is the idea, right, that God essentially has demanded the church to bring in either a spiritual or physical kingdom through the political mechanisms of the world, that you're going to make the world better. We are kind of the forerunner, actually, of the kingdom, and that we are supposed to make the way smooth and the path wide, and we create, right? That's the idea. And they will say, we are not replacement theologians. They will say that we are fulfillment theologians. That's what they'll say. Because they're using a covenant that is not explicit in Scripture to do this. It's a theological covenant. And they'll say that Israel and the church are not they're not replacing each other. The church doesn't replace Israel. but they're all part of this stream of God creating and redeeming his own people. And so the church is not Israel and Israel is not the church, but neither one actually matter. Exactly, that doesn't even matter because the real people of God is actually invisible. You don't know who they are. And that's going to be what's brought about in the kingdom. I'm like, so try to, one of my, I mean, I may be,
Get around that.
this may be slightly pedantic, and I may be, maybe I have a bad raging case of theological Dunning-Kruger syndrome. You know what I mean? Like where you're so dumb that you think that you're smarter than everybody else. I think that explains a lot of the electorate in the United States today. I don't think that's the case, but I want to hold that out there. You can tell me if I'm so dumb I think I'm smart sometime. But I don't know how you would explain that to Abraham. I don't know how you would explain that to David. I don't know how you would explain that to Solomon. I don't know how you would explain that to the apostles, who thought that they themselves were going to rule over tribes of Israel on the thrones in the kingdom. I don't know how you explain any of that. Yeah.
Josh, it does say somewhere, I don't know where it is, but it says as long as the sun rises and.
Yep.
And Israel will be a nation before me forever.
Yep. Even in exile, they were a nation, right? That's the
Yeah.
whole point of the vision of Ezekiel, getting his hot rod vision, with the wheels on it. Y'all are my covenant people, even when you're in exile, and I'll follow. I'll go with you, even under this situation, right? That's the issue. So I don't know how you explain that, because one of the key components, and this is where they just disagree here, is that a prophecy fulfillment has to be recognizable to the people to whom it was made. In other words, it has to not just make sense to Abraham's descendants who are like the seashore, but it has to make sense to Abraham. And the covenant made to Moses has to be understood by Moses, by David, by Solomon, all these guys, by the apostles. Jesus didn't correct them and say, no, you're wrong, you butts will not be on thrones in an actual kingdom. You have to be satisfied with an angelic heavenly throne like me, which is what they say, right? That doesn't fly. And I think you need to understand that they agree with that. Most of the time, supersessionists and replacement theologians actually agree that if you read the Bible that way, you have to be a dispensationalist. And that is why we don't read the Bible that way. I mean, they'll just say it. I don't know if they understand what they're saying. This is, years ago, I think it was you, Becky, that told somebody that was, no, it was you. So you got to talk to Pastor Josh about that. She said, well, he's a theologian. I'm not going to talk to him about it. You don't want the answer? What do you want? You want your feelings regurgitated to you? I don't know. I don't know what you want. But if you read the Bible that way, even the Christian anti-Semitism, supersessionist, fulfillment, whatever you want to call them, they agree. The knowledgeable ones agree that if you read the Bible this way, this is how you read it. This is how it comes out. This is what you have. So you need to understand they are making a determination about what hermeneutic they're going to use because they don't like the result, which is bad. Bad mojo. That's bad to read anything that way. It's bad to read the Constitution that way. You shouldn't even really read the phone book that way. You still know what a phone book is. You shouldn't read your Google results that way, right? That's what Google's trying to do for you right now. You type in something and AI tells you what you want to hear. Do not ask Grok what the gospel of Jesus Christ is, because Grok is a heretic. You don't know what Grok is? It's the AI guy on Twitter, on X, right? I saw recently a gospel presentation that the AI bot there wrote. It was horrific. Horrific. Yeah, so anyway, you can tell what's out there. Anyway, it's important. It's important because the Bible tells us why the kingdom isn't here, and it also tells us that it's still coming and that Israel has a future plan. So we kind of stopped there, dealt with some questions, some comments, whatever, but we have some more, right? Why did Samaritans exist? Oh, because there were still Jews left in the land, and then Assyria brought other people. The king of Assyria brought men from Babylon and from Cutha and from Ava and from Hamath and Sepharvaim and settled them in the cities of Samaria in place of the sons of Israel. So they possessed Samaria and lived in its cities. At the beginning of their living there, they did not fear Yahweh. Therefore, Yahweh sent lions among them, which killed some of them. I love it when Yahweh sends bees after the Canaanites, but I even like this a little more. Now, who's the they, though? This is what's interesting to me. Who's the they here? That they did not fear Yahweh. Therefore, Yahweh sent lions among. Choose your pronouns, folks. That's the fashionable thing to do today, right? Who the pronoun refer to? Any idea?
Mixed bunch,
At minimum, the mixed bunch.
yeah.
Yeah, I think you have the Assyrians as well as the natives of Samaria, and they didn't. Yeah, whoever's still there. Yeah. And so Yahweh sends in lions among them, which killed some of them. Now I'm not big into like typology and figurative things, but it's kind of unique, right? That the lion symbol of Judah is coming in and destroying Assyrians. But what does it tell you about living in the land? The requirements are the same for the blessing of God to come on the land. When the Assyrians and the Samaritans, they're not called that yet, do not fear Yahweh, Yahweh comes in and kills them. Right? When they have this pluralistic environment. And if the Assyrians want to live in the land, they have to obey the law of the land in God's eyes. Otherwise, God comes and kills them. That's what happens. So like this last week, right? What's Governor Greg Abbott under fire for? What's he getting sued for? Did y'all not read this? CARE and the Muslim Brotherhood got designated as terrorist organizations, and he wants to outlaw Sharia law courts in the United States, or in Texas anyway, whether he can. We should do it in the United States. Recognizing that it probably won't work. As long as we have Muslims in this country, we will have Sharia law courts somehow or other. That will happen because that's the nature of the religion. Yeah, Bill? Oh, okay. I thought you had a comment. Yeah, so what is the problem with that? Well, you have two separate laws, right? And that has never been blessed by God. Certainly, I've pointed out that the problem with that is that Islam is not, they're not happy until they're in control. And they will lie, cheat, and steal until they get there. And then we will all have to lie, cheat, and steal under Islamic law. That's what will happen. We'll have to break it right and left. But the main problem with that is, of course, we immediately become enemies of Israel rather than allies. It has to be stopped if you desire to pass anything that you possess, own, or care about to your children in this nation. I'm not saying that's the most important thing in your life, but if you love your country, you have to hate Islam enough. You have to hate Islam enough because God doesn't honor two separate laws, right? I mean, that's just Proverbs. You will not have differing measures in your scales. You don't treat people. You don't mistreat the alien in your land, all those things. They didn't. So they spoke to the king of Assyria. Here's where they become theologians. This is funny to me. They spoke to the king of Assyria, saying, the nations whom you have carried away into exile in the cities of Samaria do not know the custom of the God of the land. So he has sent lions among them, and behold, they kill them because they do not know the custom of the God of the land. You ever heard about somebody getting killed by a lion? What's that movie about the two lions, the maneless lions that killed hundreds of people on the railroad? You know what? I watched that movie, enjoyed the movie, liked the movie, enjoyed the story. I mean, it's an intriguing story. No one stopped and said, the God of the universe has sent these lions to destroy this railroad. They know what's happening. They don't even use his name. That's unremarkable. They don't know his name, but they're aware that this is a divine intervention. I don't know how bad were the lions going around with gang colors. I don't know how did they identify what was going on? But this is their perception, right? The Assyrians are polytheists. The catalog of gods that they will worship, they're totally fine doing that. They understand the problem. The problem is that we are not doing obeisance to this God, and we're still worshiping our gods, but we're in the wrong spot. Who was it? I remember there was a battle, and I forget what it was. They fought them. I said, well, they're mountain people, and we have to fight them on the plain. You know, that pagan idea. I forget exactly where that was. they go back and, well, we're going to have to fight them in the plain because their God is a God of the mountains. We got to go. And then they, God is not a God of the mountain. He's a God of everywhere, right? They find that out. That's how it is. So the king of Assyria, he's a solutions guy. Take there one of the priests whom you carried away into exile, and let him go and live there, and let him teach the custom of the God of the land. So where are they pulling priests from?
From the people they took.
From the people they took. Is this probably a Levitical priest? How did Jeroboam the son of Nebat and others appoint priests?
Anybody?
Warm body recruitment.
Yeah.
To serve which god of the land? The golden calf.
Yes.
Likely, 99.9% chance, they got a guy that just stumbled into this job anyway. I like how you become county judge of El Paso County, right? You just kind of fall into it. One day you own a barbershop, and then you get an office. That's what they're trying to fix this with. It has been so long that they have worshipped Yahweh alone. The kingdom has been divided. Even the nations around them, I don't think, can distinguish between who Israel worships and who they should be worshiping. Because I'm not sure that a priest of Yahweh, a Levitical priest, would even go back. You know what I mean? Like, there are people right now, we support Israel. In the modern nation of Israel, we support Israel because we understand the unconditional nature of the Abrahamic covenant. We went over that. There are people who avail themselves of Aliyah, right, the law of return, and they go back, and they sit there with their arms crossed and lemon faces because they realize that the nation is not obeying Yahweh. They're not being faithful even to the law that they know. And that's why they weep. Those are the ultra-Orthodox that understand Scripture, teach one thing, and they're going to live in the land, but they're going to live in the land so they have a right to complain. Right? They can recognize what happened and the nature of the apostasy in the nation, those things. Now, they have a different resolution than we would have. We know that they need to believe in Jesus. They want them to start keeping the Mosaic law and rebuild the temple. You can see the problems with that, but they understand the issues of them being in the nation. So they took one back. Every nation still made gods of its own, put them in the houses of the high places, which the people of Samaria had made. Every nation in their cities in which they lived. So they're trying to make sure they include everybody in the catalog. Kind of like you've heard my opinion on the Abraham Accords, right? Yeah, that's a pluralistic statement to say that Islam is an Abrahamic religion. Anyway, so when you do that, when you put the government in charge of naming things, they do stupid things like that. But they're not consolidating, right? Because we know that Gentiles and non-Davidic kings can be blessed in the land when they're ruling the land. We've seen that Assyria was held accountable, because they didn't worship Yahweh once they moved into property that was possessed by Yahweh for his covenant people. But they brought in the priest in an effort to add the proper God to the catalog. It's not the right God. He's not the right priest, almost assuredly. And they still have this pluralism going on in the land, which is exactly what the Canaanites were driven out for originally. Nobody's exempt. So the men of Babylon made Sukkot Benot, the men of Cuth made Nergal, the men of Hamath made Ashima, and the Avites made Nibhaz and Tartak. The Sepharvites burned their children in the fire to Adramelech and Anamelech, the gods of Sepharvaim. You won't find those words frequently in the Bible. These aren't necessarily major cultic figures. They're literally everybody just worshipped whatever they wanted. Dr. Ken Bingham years ago, who was a historical theology professor, told a story about a girl at an Ivy League college that he was aware of, I think it was, that started a cult of the acorn. Completely off her rocker, she went out and started worshiping an acorn in the courtyard of whatever school she was at. That's just kind of the picture. They just worship whatever the heck they want, every part of creation that they want. And they're just trying to add Yahweh into that and make sure they get all their bases covered. They also feared Yahweh. What? They did all of these things. The idea is that they did they understood who sent the lions. They understood who sent the lions. But you understand they adopted the wrong solution, right? It is key to identify the problem correctly, yes? Right?
Yeah.
Most people never get that far. If it's a machine, they won't take off the dust cover and look at what the real problem is. If it's a car, they won't pop the hood and look. Vacuum cleaner, they won't pop the hood and look. When there's a theological problem, a covenantal problem, a violation, they don't pop the hood and look. What's the problem? Who owns the land? And what's the resolution, right? So you've got a problem. If you're addressing the problem correctly, but you cannot go where you need to go to find the solution. It's not surprising that the Assyrians couldn't do it. But they feared the Lord. They served their own gods, according to the custom of the nations from among whom they had carried away into exile. Another dynamic here, how does God judge nations?
How they treat Israel.
Giving them wicked rulers.
Oh, yeah.
But so there's still Israelites, there's still Jewish people in the land, and they've got these Assyrians. I was just about to say something from my more rednecky days, and I shouldn't say it that way. They really can't tell up from down, right? They can't tell the God that they were supposed to be worshiping and serving in this land from a hole in the ground. See how restrained I am. I didn't even use my old redneck phrase, today. All right.
Close.
You should appreciate. Yeah. I was about to say something that probably my wife would have frowned at me for saying, and that is what I'm trying to avoid here.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah. You guys ought to be thankful for her influence on me. She's been hanging out with me for a long time. It could have gone the other way bad. Could have gone the other way real bad. Anyway, they did that. They served their own gods. They imported their cult. They added Yahweh to the catalog. And to this day, they do according to their earlier customs. So there's pluralism, right, infecting Samaria here. What's the difference? Well, what did Jeroboam the son of Nebat do? He was the first church growth guy, right? People have to drive too far to go to Jerusalem, and we have to make this acceptable to them and make it easy. But he was trying to substitute the worship of Yahweh. And that's a different kind of animal. God treats it harshly, badly, with retribution. It's a recurring chorus and theme throughout the history of the nation. Everybody is compared in wickedness to Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. Everybody. The pluralism is harder to convince people of. Bringing that in. It's harder to understand all the things that it's infecting and all of the things that it is causing a problem. They feared Yahweh to an extent, but did they fear Yahweh enough to be going to Jerusalem to go to a Levitical priesthood to do all those things? They did not. From what I see in this text, right? But to this day, they do according to their earlier customs. They do not fear Yahweh, nor do they follow their statutes or their ordinances or their law or the commandments which Yahweh commanded the sons of Jacob, whom he named Israel. This is another one that you probably shouldn't read Jewish commentators on, Danny, because Scripture tells us what Israel means. It means he who strives with God. And they try to find it etymologically. It's all sorts of other meanings in the name Israel. It literally refers to the stiff-necked people who are constantly striving against God. It is a covenant name. God is aware of how this is going to go, and he makes the covenant anyway. That's actually the story of Hosea, right? Hosea knows exactly the kind of woman God tells him. Can you imagine getting the short end of the stick like that? We warn people. I warn people. Do not make a baby with that kind of woman, right? Young men, that will destroy your life. And God's out there saying, hey, Hosea, have I got a deal for you? Go find that kind of woman and you marry that woman. And you go get her again when she runs off. Exactly the opposite of my advice as a pastor. A woman like that runs off, you let her, man. If you didn't listen to me the first time, listen to me the second. That's the picture. God knows all of this, and yet he maintains his covenant perfectly and unconditionally. And he said he named them Israel. He named them he who strives with Yahweh. and with whom Yahweh made a covenant and commanded them, saying, You shall not fear other gods, nor bow down yourselves to them, nor serve them, nor sacrifice to them. But Yahweh, who brought you up from the land of Egypt with great power and with an outstretched arm, him you shall fear, and to him you shall bow yourselves down, and to him you shall sacrifice. The statutes and ordinances and the law and the commandment which he wrote for you, you shall observe to do forever, and you shall not fear other gods. The covenant that I have made with you, you shall not forget, nor shall you fear other gods, but Yahweh your God you shall fear, and he will deliver you from the hand of all your enemies. However, they did not listen, but they did according to their earlier custom. We're out of minutes. Any question as to why Israel is where Israel is in the historical record and today based on that passage? The author, the writer, the compiler, however you want to view it, we don't know who he is. You know, most of the Old Testament is actually technically anonymous. We don't claim an author directly, but the author and the writer is going to great lengths to describe what is happening in Israel and why their condition is what it is, and very applicable to today in our understanding of Israel. Any questions, comments, observations, accusations of heresy? Bill, I got him this time. Look, I waited. Yeah, Bill.
And yet, today when you look at Israel, it looks like God's blessing the land.
Yes.
So, would you say then this is the return? Right?
It is, two things. It is a return, a partial return.
Yeah.
There are still far more Jews that don't live in Israel than do. I think it's a precursor. I do think that prophecy allows for an unbelieving return. I think that's actually necessary in a way, because obviously they're going to rebuild a temple, which is not a positive, right? That's an apostate temple, apostate cultic worship, and provides for the abomination of desolation, all those things. That is actually the epitome of rebellion still at that point. But for the epitome of rebellion to exist, they do have to be back in the land, right? They can't make a mockery of this worship without the temple. And that is something that you really got to consider. I mean, the nature of what has to change in the world right now for Israel to have sovereignty over the Temple Mount in the way that their religion requires. You're going to have Islam is going to have to either change or go away as a world power. And that is a radical change right now. That is a radical change. We often talk about the United States being diminished for prophecy, but something has to take place. Something has to take place, because if the temple could be built somewhere else, they would build it somewhere else. Right. But there's competing claims. Islam views Sugar Land, Texas, where y'all went to church, right? Yeah. Just had Sharam Hadian, a acquaintance of mine, give his testimony there the other day, directly in response to thousands of Muslims going and claiming Sugar Land for Islam outside of Houston, right? That's the way they view the world, that it's their possession, and anywhere they set their foot, literally, is Islamic territory forever. And that's why that has to change something. So as far as the prophetic significance of the modern nation of Israel, which I think is kind of at the root of your question, Bill, I think everybody has to say we don't know exactly how a democratic, secular government transitions into a people that is ruled by a righteous king. What we can say is the modern nation of Israel is a major protector of Jewish people. It is a primary protector of Jewish people, and that is why we should support it. At bare minimum.
There were more Jews in New York City than there were in Israel.
Yeah, I think that's shifted though, Bill. Yeah, in the world, there's still, I think it's millions and millions and millions of Jews don't live in Israel, but there have been many returns, many, that has increased certainly. Partly because they have actually been driven out of all these supposedly religions of peace countries. There used to be in Iran a recognizable population of observant Jews, and there's zero now. Even though all of the other things, the revival in Iran is taking place, it's statistically zero. It's not countable.
I think that a lot lot of the anti-Semitism that's going all over the world now,
Mm-hmm.
to a much greater extent than you would have ever thought in America
Mm-hmm.
and other parts of the world. I think that's part of God driving them back to Israel.
Sure.
Because that's the crucible in which God.
That's right. And crucible is a good way to describe it.
They're coming from all parts.
Yeah, it's not a, but understand it's not a, we're not John Hagee theology folks here. We're not dual covenant people. We cannot go far enough to say that is a sign of their redemption, that they're going back to the land. That's a preparation
It's a preparation, yeah.
for the crucible, right? For the fulfillment of the time of Jacob's trouble, all of those, that's what that is. So in a sense, we should be joyful, right, that we can see prophecy being prepared. We can see that God is fulfilling his purpose, that he's preparing for that. But we shouldn't be all super happy and hunky-dory that the stage is being set for the abomination of desolation. I mean, like, we shouldn't treat that flippantly, right? That's what's taking place when unbelieving Jews are going back into Israel. That's what's happening. And the Messianic Jews that live in Israel are part of the church, right?
Yeah.
They don't lose their Jewish identity. They're not going to be there for that time of Jacob's trouble. They have a ministry there now, and they're going to be taken out. But we need to be somber and serious and sober-minded about what's taking place. And those things, understand that it is a harbinger of God's working in Israel, and that is going to be unpleasant for them, terrible for them in the time of Jacob's trouble, something that if God himself did not declare an end to, no life would be left on earth. That's the way Jesus describes it. We can go and turn that off, Danny.